I'm Dana Kozlov with Audrina Sinclair. We want to get you caught up on some breaking news in north suburban Skokie, where there has been a massive water main break engulfing several miles of roads in that suburb. As you can see right here, a boil water alert has been issued in Skokie, and it's because of this mess that you see.
Yeah, this has just been unbelievable. We're seeing, and we wanted to come on the stream to keep you updated because this is a very developing situation right now. And there's several angles to the story. And by the way, we do have crews on the ground and in the air. We'll get to Chris in just a moment. I want to note, though, that Skokie Morton Grove School District 69 canceled school because of the break. We've got road closures from Dempster to East Prairie to Gulf and McCormick. And we've got Chris Habermill following the impact of that. Chris, we're going to bring you in live here to give us some details as we've been looking at this incredible video from Skywatch.
Well, it's just breathtaking, the amount of water that's actually come out of this main transmission line, and it's a large diameter water main, obviously, high capacity. Other smaller mains come off of that, and then your service lines branch off of that. So once the breach happened about 5:15 this morning at East Prairie and Emerson Street, and actually blew water right through the pavement, it got into the street, one street after another. Was inundated with water, and everything basically flowed down to the south. You could see this video from Skywatch that we have people that are walking ankle or mid-calf deep in water. In some cases, it's up to their knees, depending on the actual topography there. You see off to the right that curving stretch. That's not a creek. That's McCormick Boulevard, all the way from Gulf Road on down to about Dempster. In between those 2 points, you've got this. And the one fortunate thing about the water still cascading out of that break, although the flow is starting to ease just a little bit, is that moving water doesn't freeze. And close by, you've got the handy North Shore channel that a lot of those storm sewers dump out into. So that being the case, we've made some maps so we can show you essentially where everything is and what streets are closed down and what part of Skokie it is. So this is our wide view right here. So this is what I would normally use for traffic, but we have gone and flown into the scene of this incident here. And this is where the break is, at East Prairie Road and Emerson Street. So just south of Gulf/Emerson. Emerson does kind of a different little jog right there in that curve of the North Shore Channel. This is where that water has flown southward to on parts of Ewing, McCormick Boulevard, Forest View Road, East Prairie, and so water seeks its own level, and if it's going downhill, that's where it's going. Fortunately, a lot of that, some of that anyway, has been caught by storm drains and taken off to the nearby North Shore Channel. I'll talk to you about that in just a minute. But all of these roads and the houses in between, the alleyways behind, the garages, they're all underwater right now. The cars are at least rocker panel deep, coming up into possibly some of the footwells in some of those cars. It's that deep. The biggest issue here, and the thing that is most alarming, is that it has occurred in deep winter. We're below freezing, and that is going to maintain that low below freezing temperature and turn a lot of this stuff to ice. It's already happening. These are the major road closures. Eastbound Gulf from Central Park over to McCormick Boulevard. It is completely under from Dempster down to Gulf. We've got Church Street from Ewing to McDaniel, basically either side of the channel, and East Prairie from Church to Gulf. Now, the North Shore Channel, what I was talking about, between about Wilmette Harbor and the North Branch at Belmont, that was actually made to improve the flow of the North Branch of the Chicago River. So the water is coming in off of Lake Michigan by Wilmette Harbor, right there by the Baha'i Temple. It comes around that curve, and it goes south down towards Belmont. So we're going to start to see an increased amount of flow getting into the channel as well. So that is the only one saving grace, the kind of light, not so much the light at the end of the tunnel, but it kind of helps to get some of that water and keep it moving. Now we've got our own Sabrina Franza, who's out on the street there, and I think, Sabrina, you're pretty close to the source of where that water is coming from.
Hey, Chris, we are, and we've watched, as you mentioned, it start to slow down a little bit. If you want to take a look at where we've seen the water start to cascade from, it's right in the center of where you see all this emergency equipment in the middle of this intersection, which is a relatively busy intersection for a residential area. We've seen a lot of cars try to make their way through here regardless of this break, and then being forced to turn around, either because they see how deep the water has become or because officers here on the ground have turned them around at intersections leading into this one that you're looking at right here. If we walk a little bit closer, you can kind of see just how much things have frozen on the ground here. This is further away, of course, from the source of the water, but we've heard, as we've been standing here even, some of the water as it pours out of this water main break come underneath this thin sheet of glass and even ice, and break. It sounds like glass breaking as the water kind of makes its way down the street and then immediately freezes over. You can even see it better here actually on this side of the street where there's this sheet of ice that's just coating the entire side of the street, and it breaks in the center where you can see how water has been flowing steadily underneath the ice here as the water flows out of this water main break. There have been cars that were submerged in water a few blocks away from here and really just encased in ice as the water has frozen, forcing some of the neighbors to come outside and talk to us. We spoke to somebody who was moving their car from the house that's just on the corner here. Thankfully, she says her basement is doing okay at this hour. She was mostly concerned about that because she says a lot of the homes in this area have been known to flood in their basements. Many of them are constructed the same way, she says. So she was walking not just to move her own car, but to check on her neighbors as well to make sure that they're doing okay in these frigid temps. Some of the folks that live here were telling us that they actually live in condos in the area, and they're especially concerned because in their development, their heat is actually powered by the water supply. So we're hearing from different buildings that we're hearing a hospital nearby was also without water. That building where the woman was speaking to us that lives in the condo was concerned about not having water and therefore not having heat. So there is that boil order in effect. Some of the folks were telling us they were going out to buy water because they don't know how long this is going to go on. The good news is, though, we are seeing the water start to slow from this break. We were seeing crews on the ground clearing the way for some of that drainage to happen. So hopefully that's alleviating some of the problem here. But the cleanup will definitely take some time, especially to get people their water back on, especially if some of the cars have been damaged in this break and if basements have been impacted here. But I'll send it back to the studio. Dana and Audrina, back to you.
So Sabrina, I just want to be clear. So since you've been there, and you've been there now for a couple of hours, have you seen the water recede at all? I mean, is that what you're actually seeing, or have you seen it stop flowing, or both?
It seems like it has receded a little bit, but it is interesting because some of the water has not completely receded simply because it's turned into ice.
Right.
So it's created this kind of sheet on top of the street here, which makes it dangerous for pedestrians, makes it dangerous for cars to drive by. We've seen some emergency crews kind of use their snow plows to break up the ice so that the water can either continue to flow and not freeze, or just, you know, not be completely a sheet of ice over the street at all. The water also, though, as you mentioned, does seem to be slowing down coming out of this water main. Before it was rising high above the water level, and now we're seeing it just kind of bubble up over the surface. So it does seem like less water is coming up now, and that's some good news here in Skokie.
Okay, Sabrina, thank you.
All right, if we do a time check here, if you're just joining us, it's 10:30 right now. At 5:15 this morning is when that water main broke. And since then, from our aerial shots, we've seen water, like knee-deep water in these icy conditions. Crews have been trying to clean out the drains because of this break. And a big factor right now, as Sabrina was just mentioning, Dana, is the temperatures. Earlier this morning, it was just at 14 degrees. We're going to bring in David Yeomans now, our meteorologist, to talk about that part of this story. David, we've got some really difficult conditions they're dealing with, too.
Dana, Audrina, this is a crucial part of the story. You said it happened just before 6 a.m. That was the time of day when the temperatures looked like this. Morning lows in some of our western suburbs were 8 below in Aurora and McHenry. In the Skokie area near O'Hare, we had low single digits. Waukegan this morning, not far up the road, was 1 degree. So, of course, course, the freezing point is 32. When you're 30 degrees colder than that, ice forms quickly, and ice forms a little deeper and faster than it normally would. North of the loop up here in Skokie, temperatures are slow to rebound. Now, we do have south winds that are warming us up a little more quickly than we otherwise would see as clouds are blocking the sun. It's 17 in Skokie, still well below freezing, and things are not looking good for the deep, solid ice that's forming on streets, in neighborhoods, and unfortunately possibly in homes and businesses right now. High temperatures today, even with the south wind trying to warm us up, stay below freezing. Tomorrow, yes, we do make it to 34, but in the northern suburbs, we're more like 32, 33. Even if we do briefly edge above freezing for an hour or two by 1 degree, that's not going to affect the deep ice that forms between now and then over the next 24 hours. And after that time, we have a reappearance of a polar vortex. Temperatures getting down to the single digits for highs for a couple of days next week. And even as we rebound next weekend, it will take about a week and a half, I think, to get any measurable or significant amount of time above freezing. Those were the daytime highs. How about overnight lows? Yes, they're a little warmer, but still below freezing the next couple of nights. But look at this. I mentioned the polar vortex bringing dangerous cold next week. You know what a low temperature of 6 below, 3 below, 5 below will do in the city. Even a couple degrees colder than this next week in Skokie. Ice that forms today is really not going to go anywhere. This all has to do, guys, with the molecular structure of what we call hydrogen bonds. I know you didn't think we were going to talk about hydrogen bonds today, but as you know, in southern communities especially, when we have a risk of freezing cold temperatures, people have to drip their faucet. That opens the plumbing system to give water a way to escape, because as water freezes, it expands, and it expands by 9%. So if you have a closed pipe or a closed basement or a closed area where ice is forming in Skokie right now, it is going to expand by 9%. And the hydrogen bonds that solidify when it expands by 9% are so strong that it can burst pipes, it can crack foundations, it can crack siding and pieces of homes. This, Dana and Audrina, is a dangerous situation, but it's one that's not going to really resolve itself in the absence of some massive outside source of heat for the next week or week and a half.
Yeah, which is part of the concern, of course, this morning. We want to mention, thanks, David. We want to mention that we have reached out to various departments, the Public Works Department in Skokie, the mayor, et cetera, to try to get more information and an update. Obviously, they're very busy right now, but if we do hear from them, we'll let you know. And, Audrina, you mentioned that boil order in Skokie, and now there's one in Evanston as well.
I'm looking at Evanston's website right now. They just posted this about 9 minutes ago. They said because of the reported main break in Skokie, they are assisting the village as well, and as a precaution, they have put a boil water order in effect. Do not drink tap water without first boiling it. So this really, Dana, just shows the scope of what we're dealing with here. There's so much concern. We've heard people 3 miles away with no water right now or low water pressure.
Yeah, in fact, two of friends of mine who live not far from there, they don't have any water, but they have no water right now, none at all, and their kids are also home because District 69 has canceled classes.
Yeah. Chris Habermill is joining us now, and Chris, we have really been looking at the scope of this in terms of the square mile radius, maybe like 4 square miles. What do you think here, based on the video?
At least a good couple of miles that we have water that's standing in the street. It's curb to curb. It's across into some yards. It's definitely into some alley garages as well in the area. Our main arterials there, like McCormick Boulevard, that's completely inundated from curb to curb. You've got parts of other main streets there. Eastbound Gulf has had to be shut down because there was some standing water that folks were driving through, but it wasn't deep enough to really keep it moving, so it started to turn to ice, so they had to keep that closed. Right now, look at this from Skywatch. You can see the backyards between the houses and the alley garages and the outbuildings, the sheds and what have you. You've got a city truck that's there with the plow blade on the front there that would be normally putting down salt and moving snow out of the way. It is up to its axles, maybe even a little bit over. It's up to the rocker panels on the bottom of the door. The side rails are all disappeared there, and you can see that one city worker who's looking around for the storm sewer, he's up to his knees. So that is a lot of water out there. Off to the left, you've got a minivan there that it is literally up to the footwells on the vehicles there. So undoubtedly, there's some vehicles that have actually had water enter into the vehicles themselves. They will no doubt be frozen in place. And you can see here, they're also looking to clean out storm drains and looking for shutoffs to some of the water supplies that are out here. But you've got a large dump truck that's got salt in the back. They got the plows down there, so your public works is hard at it. You've got your water department out there. You've got another salt truck that is out here that would normally be pushing snow out of the way. He's pushing very carefully a lot of the ice flow and everything, trying to keep it away from some of the storm drains. The storm drains, at least some of them are connected to, or at least there's a couple of culverts that we've seen running water open flow into the North Shore Channel close by. So at parts of Gulf and Emerson here, you can see the eastbound side of Gulf, that is all closed off. The westbound side is open. It's down to one lane there. Think of the amount of salt that's going to have to be put down here. That bridge in the background there, that is under the North Shore Channel, which was built in the early part of the last century to actually help the flow of the North Branch of the Chicago River. It was built man-made. It links up to the North Branch at Belmont and goes all the way up to Wilmette Harbor. So basically what they've taken is some of the flow out of Lake Michigan and allowed that to kind of get some current going in the North Shore Channel and help the North Branch of the Chicago River flow into the main channel and then down into the South Branch and out toward the Illinois River. We've got ourselves some maps that I can show you of some of the streets that are affected and where everything started early this morning at about 5:15 or so in the small hours of the morning. This is what it looks like right now. This is normally the core expressway maps I use for our traffic in the morning and sometimes in the afternoon. Zooming into Skokie, on the right side of the map, that's part of Evanston. On the left side, on the other side of the North Shore Channel, that is Skokie. So here is the main break at East Prairie Road and Emerson Street, and it's a large diameter, what's called a transmission main. And some of the smaller mains come off of that, then your service lines come off of the smaller mains as well. So water seeks its own level. It's going to be flowing downhill, and basically from north to south, this is where it kind of invaded all of these cross streets here, all the way down McCormick Boulevard. It turned that into a canal, Forest View, East Prairie. We've got our east-west streets that have filled in parts of Gulf and Emerson and Lyons and Davis and Lake and Greenwood, and north-south you got East Prairie and Forest View and Ewing and McCormick Boulevard that are all affected by water. That being the case, these large roads, these arterials had to be shut down here. So McCormick Boulevard, Dempster down to Gulf, Church Street from Ewing to McDaniel, basically either side of the North Shore Channel, and East Prairie from Church to Gulf, and eastbound Gulf from Central Park over to McCormick. They're kind of staging all of their equipment on the higher side of this leak there. So that being the case, I talked about the North Shore Channel. Fortunately, it's close by. It'll handle some of the runoff water, probably not all of it, but at least that gives anything that's in the street a way to keep moving. This is basically our dripping faucet theory here that David was talking about. Moving water is not going to freeze. Stagnant water, when water starts to slow down and stop, those hydrogen bonds stick together and it becomes ice and it starts to blow things out. So there's your flow from Wilmette Harbor all the way by Baha'i Temple, around the curve there by Emerson underneath that bridge, and then on south under Church, and then on underneath Dempster and on down. So the North Shore Channel will help out a little bit. It's not going to be the end-all, be-all, but at least it gives us a little bit of hope that that water can remain moving, at least anything that hits or flows into some of the culverts that empty out into the North Shore Channel will be able to keep some of that current moving and some of that water from stagnating and turning to ice underneath there and making an ice column full thickness all the way from what we see on the top all the way down to the pavement, because that could be an absolute nightmare. Any way you cut it, this is not the time of year to have something like this happen.
No, not at all.
Dana and Audrina, back to you.
Thank you, Chris. And to recap, there is a massive water main break in Skokie. It happened about 5:15. You saw Chris showing us on a map where it is impacting parts of Skokie and now parts of Evanston. Miles of roadway covered in water right now. Boil orders in effect in Skokie and in Evanston as a result.
And as we look ahead right now, we want to join us in our news at 11. We'll have the latest for you from Skywatch and our crews on the ground. Again, right now, Evanston saying that the Village of Skokie has not established a specific timeline for completing any of these repairs. So we've got a long way to go here. Stick with us on CBS News Chicago on air and on TV at 11. We'll have the latest for you.
Have a good day, everyone.